Welcome to Atty911, the podcast. With attorney Ralph Manginello, let's get some answers to the most asked questions. We break down the legal issues and provide expert advice to help you navigate life's legal challenges. You might even call us your first responder to a legal emergency. Up next, real-world cases, valuable insights, and practical tips you can use today. It's time to get smart like a lawyer.
Stephen Lee is not only a great friend of mine, but a great person and someone who I truly love as a person, and very successful commercial real estate magnate. Knows a lot about everything, in my opinion. Great
You're too kind.
Community leader, great dad for his children, great husband for his wife, great friend of me and many others. But also in the healthcare business and a volunteer EMS. What would I call you? What is it? The EMS personnel.
I'm a volunteer fireman and a medic. So yeah.
So anyway, that's my introduction. Feel free to add on to that great list that I just.
that was a very, very humbling introduction. Thank you so much for that, Ralph. I mean, like I said, I think great people draw great people. So I think we're very much alike in many attributes. So again, thank you so much for having me on the show today.
I appreciate it. So let's get right into it. Tell everyone how you got into the healthcare business, first of all, and then we'll talk about your EMS medic and fireman.
Sure. So yeah, so our family background's always been real estate. Started off in residential and found my little niche in commercial, mom and pop's type of retail real estate for us. So that's what I've been doing for a very long time. Along the way, I came into a new brokerage with my now brother-in-law, who my in-laws were in healthcare, specifically the day hab is the more technical terminology, is adult daycare side of things. And since then, kind of helping them along and kind of doing both along the way. And we've kind of progressed to where we are today, which, I still am very blessed to still have our commercial real estate practice. But then my wife and I still have our adult daycare, which we are celebrating 19 years this year of being within our communities over here.
That's amazing. So what is adult daycare mean? Like, I mean, I don't even know what that means. What does that mean?
So it's so funny you say that, because a lot of people are like, oh, they think adult daycare is very much like child daycare, right?
Right.
And then, of course, sending anybody's mom and dad at a daycare. Oh, my God, can you imagine the arguments that come out of that,
My wife is in on it, by the way. If this is a good explanation, she might send me. So,
okay.
Just kidding.
You see what I mean?
Just kidding.
So it's like when you get past a certain age, I think everyone says, oh, I'm going to send my parents to daycare. And it's really not quite the case. So, over the years, I think the state has, the industry has renamed the business, I guess, where it's adult day activity and health services, which is, I think it's a little more accurate, but we, as the older generation, know it as daycare. And the cool thing about it is we are a non-residential facility for elderly and disabled adults to attend during the day. And the key part is it's not a secret sauce by any stretch of the imagination. We exercise them physically. We exercise them mentally. We give them a great meal while they're here, so they get to hang out with their friends. And at the end of the day, they can stay at home. And the goal with us is to keep these folks within the community, because that's where you thrive. It's like you want to be at home. You don't want to be in a nursing home prematurely. So, but during the day, you're bored out of your mind because, hey, my daughter or my son's at work, my grandchildren are at school. What are you going to do? So the issue that we've seen over the years is they get bored, they get depressed. You see a lot of premature aging, a lot of premature placements in nursing facilities because they have nothing to do. And we'll get to this on the other volunteer side of things later. Whereas for me, it's like, when they're at home, they're not doing anything. If they have a medical emergency, well, a lot of this could have been prevented. Whereas if they were at a facility where someone was able to catch it on time, maybe we could have gotten them some better help. Or if your mom and dad has like early stages of dementia, or they're just very forgetful and they leave the stove on, you and I can see where that gets to be a bad day, So that's kind of what we do in the day. Yeah, so we have a little mini country club, I guess you could say, for people to come to during the day. Yep.
That sounds, it makes total sense. And I'm just wondering why there aren't more around, or are there a lot around that I just don't know about?
There really isn't much around because it is extremely highly regulated. Number one, because you're working with elderly and disabled adults, which the state has. I think they're on point about making sure it is regulated because you don't want just everyone kind of doing this and not it's a wild wild west, right? So and on top of that, this isn't really the most profitable thing. This is something, and it's not to say that we're any better than anybody else, but you really do. You're in this industry because you love to be in it. The people that work with me over here are really in it because they enjoy doing it. You're not doing it for the money by any stretch. Home care, medical supplies, assisted living, nursing homes. That's where people find the bigger bucks at. We over here, we're happy where we're at. I think we make a big difference within our communities over here. We are a very community-oriented family, as you can see, like yourself. So that's why we like this little area that we're at.
That's so cool. I mean, it just makes total sense, and it seems like, you're prolonging their life, you're making their life not only active but meaningful,
Mhm.
and just makes total sense. So,
Yeah, you'd be very surprised. A lot of people when they come by over here, they're really kind of hunched up. They don't really smile much because they've been kind of in this dark hole. But they come over here, they socialize, they meet like friends or whatnot, and that is kind of 70% of the battle for them. They work out a little more, their knees don't hurt as much. Then now they're kind of like, hey, I'm enjoying life a little better.
right.
And so yeah.
Well, yeah, and then maybe they can go to their grandkids' baseball games or football or basketball games where they weren't even, trying to get out. They were too scared to get out, or they didn't think they could handle it.
Yep.
I mean, it just like that's just so cool. Well,
You are absolutely right. We actually had one of our members this last week. She was like, "Hey, I'm going to go to Hawaii with my daughter and my son-in-law." She was like, "Because you know what, I can go do that now." She's like, "I can walk a mile or two a day now." I was like, "Good for you. Maybe I need to go walk with you a little more because I'm getting a little tired after mile one sometimes."
And it makes me want to go to Hawaii, so let me get out and go.
Right.
Good. So
Yeah.
then tell us how the transition went, and then for, I guess you're saying 19 years. I know you've been doing the volunteer
hmm
fireman and EMS stuff for almost the same time, right?
Yeah. So we have our my in-laws have had this facility for 19 years. I've been here for about 10 to 12 years, roughly. I can't remember off the top of my head because it's been so long. But when they had started this, they had started the foundation on this, and I think we just kind of took it and really kind of just really put it underneath our wings and just kind of flew with it. So that's we never looked back. Since that's why I was like, man, I don't really know how long I've kind of been here. But so I've actually started off on the volunteerism for a few years first before I came over here and did this with them. And that was just something that came out of high school for me. I think I went to high school here in Alief, and I was blessed to have a strong urge of volunteerism. So I've always enjoyed doing it. And growing up, I was kind of an adrenaline junkie. So I enjoyed doing the fun, crazy stuff. And this kind of seemed like a natural segue to kind of get into that. So my best friend started doing it. I was like, wow, I didn't realize volunteer fireman was a thing because this was in the early 2000s, right? When you say early, when you think of volunteer fireman, I was thinking about a dude with a bucket, water in the middle of some rural area, throwing, buckets of water
Right.
on a fire. And when I checked it out, it was a high volume, little big fire department. That makes sense.
Right.
We cover 26 square miles from the west side of Houston, where the city ends, all the way out into Katy, and we
That's
back up to like
huge.
Fulshire, Richmond. Yeah, so it's not too bad. I think we got about 250,000 residents now, and it's still steadily growing. But it's fun. It is so fun.
So would you, as a volunteer fireman, do you get the exact same training as a fireman that's getting paid?
Ralph, that's a very good question because that's one of the biggest misconceptions I get when I tell people I'm a volunteer fireman. They're like, "Oh, you go there and clean the station? Then that's good on you, buddy." It's like it's nice of someone to go there and cook and clean. And I was like, actually, no. I hold the rank of a suppression lieutenant. I actually steer and lead about a group of anywhere from 5 to 7, 8 gentlemen and ladies into burning structures. Between paid or career firemen and volunteer firemen, there's very similar credentials, and I promise you, the fires are just as hot.
Yeah.
The emergency calls, the medical calls are just as bad. In our service area, if you call 911, you would not know if it was a career person or a volunteer that was
Right.
actually coming out to you, which I'm the most proudest about that. If you look at some of my social medias and stuff like that, people are like, man, Steven's fireman for a living. Actually, no, I do real estate and healthcare, but it's just something we're very passionate. We love to do. And yeah, so to answer your question, there is nothing that we do any less or different.
Right.
The calls are just as bad. When you call 911, we're the guys that come and get you.
So tell us, now that you mentioned your social media account, tell everyone where to follow you.
Oh, shucks. I mean, you just look up Stephen Lee on Facebook. I know that's kind of like the older stuff, Instagram, I'm still kind of trying to get acclimated to, but I guess my Instagram name on there is just Stephen_Stephen Lee. So you can definitely follow me over there. Check
All
it out.
right.
And, if there's anything I can help you out with, if you're ever interested, give me a shout. We'll be more than happy to take you along for a ride.
Well, I know that you deal and have been dealing with a lot of emergencies you go to accident sites,
Hmm.
collision sites. You and I have talked about Atty911 and what we
Hmm.
do. And just, I was picking your brain and saying, well, wow, I've handled maybe 20,000 cases at this point, but I don't think I've ever really maybe once or twice gone to where the scene is and actually seen the destruction on the scene. And you have.
Hmm.
Tell us, in your experience, what's a common thing that you're seeing that, and we're trying to educate people and help people through our
Hmm.
podcast. What are you seeing that you're like, obviously, if people wouldn't do these couple of things, they probably wouldn't get it in collisions and get as injured. It's one's
Yeah.
obviously like wear your seatbelt would be one.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The seatbelt. Gosh, we see these commercials growing up, right? And wear your seatbelt. They drill it into you, and yes, until you see someone that's going to eject it from a car, you're like, a seatbelt. A little 2 seconds to click it. It's not just a ticket. It's your, if you don't wear it, it's your ticket upstairs. To the man upstairs if you don't do it. And that's honestly, if you're kind of lucky, because if you get ejected, sometimes you can suffer some really bad traumatic injuries that might be, it might last you the rest of your life. And it's unfortunate. We would never consider any of our loved ones to be a burden by any stretch of the imagination. But imagine if you were just shy of a vegetable, and from a negligent accident, as I would say, that's just quite unfortunate. And you'll hear me say negligent a lot because, to complement or to echo what you're saying, most of what we're seeing is just a lot of negligence. Most of these accidents, I would say 99% of, I would say, could be easily preventable if people just simply weren't negligent. In past years, when I first started off, drinking and driving was a big thing, right? And it still is today. But now distracted driving, I think is what you would probably call it, is just, some people say it's an equal, and I would say, I dare to challenge. I would say it's a much greater cause of a lot of these accidents, especially the preventable ones. Because you think about their accidents, but then we don't even call them motor vehicle accidents no more. We call them motor vehicle incidents, because a lawyer at some point labeled it, saying, hey, you know what? Well, some of this stuff is a negligent act, so it's not really an accident. An accident would say that, hey, you had no intention, and they don't. But these are just MVIs, as we call them now, because they're incidents. Because yes, a lot of them have been just due to negligence. And I think texting and driving, or people watching YouTube while they're driving, or doing something on their phone and not focusing on the road, is a cause of a lot of these accidents. I don't know about you, but you and I, we can probably go down the road right now. Within 5 minutes, you see someone driving like this with their phone, literally
On
both
the
hands on their, looking like this, or
on the
like this.
freeway going
Yes,
75 in the rain.
and you're just like, tell me
Yeah.
you have a third hand on the wheel somewhere, for the love of
Yeah.
God,
Yeah. It's
and
funny you
then
say
that's what
that
happens.
about the incidents and accidents, because I just filmed a podcast, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, where I was explaining that as as a personal injury attorney and car wreck attorney, I don't say accident really at all anymore. I
Hmm.
call it a collision, because
Hmm.
someone was at fault for being negligent. It's not an
Correct.
accident.
Yeah.
if someone's staring at their phone and rear ends you going 30 miles an hour, that's not an accident. They were negligent.
Right.
They were supposed to be paying attention,
Hmm.
and, doing what they were supposed to do. So I totally agree with that explanation. It's just with what I was saying. And we handle more and more wrecks we have a case right now. I don't know if we settled it or not recently, but this pickup truck was literally crushed in the front, like an accordion into the back of my client.
Hmm.
And it was a 17 or 18-year-old kid. I was telling the other lawyer on the other side, I'm like, look, all I have to do, I'm going to get his phone records, and I'm sure it's going to show he was on the phone, because there's no way you can crunch in, an 8,000 pound or whatever it is pickup. The engine's like now this big. If he wasn't, he was definitely not paying attention. He was on his phone. I mean, it's
Did
not
he
even
even try to hit the brakes?
Exactly. I mean, obviously not, and he's probably gone 60 miles an hour. So, if there's anything, that you and I probably see the most of together, it's just, you can just tell when you show up, you're like, oh, there's no, like, that person was distracted. They were looking at their phone.
And the worst part is the passengers in the vehicle. I truly sympathize and empathize with their family members, because when you cut these people out of the car, you're just like, man, this is just somebody's best friend or whatnot. And most of the time the driver's hurt or very lightly hurt, but the fatality is usually the passenger or someone in the back seat, because they're usually the ones that are not wearing a seatbelt in the back seat, or when you swerve away from something, you swerve the driver's side away, but the passenger side goes to a tree. That's unfortunate, is what we see a lot of, and it's sad. It's very sad.
And then the thing about the ejections that you were talking about, I've had cases also, and I'm sure you've seen these too. What people don't realize is all the windows can be rolled up, and the car, should be secure, and people go through the window. And especially like on a convertible, I've had a case where somebody went through the back window, and they were in the back seat and didn't have their seatbelt on. So I know you and I are both saying the same thing, but even if you're in the back seat, wear your seatbelt.
Absolutely, wear your seatbelt, and no matter where you're sitting in the vehicle. And second to that, now that you bring it up, you reminded me to tell people, don't have any loose products in your car. Try to minimize that. Some people leave books and binders and stuff on their dash, and you never know, when a car starts rolling or flipping, things go everywhere. It was maybe about a decade ago, we actually had someone suffer a huge traumatic head injury from a Kleenex box. She got struck so hard from the rear. She was in a compact vehicle, and this is a larger SUV, a Toyota Corolla versus a Lincoln Navigator, to be exact, because I'll never forget her. But yeah, that Kleenex box went right into the back of her head. And we life flighted her to War Herman.
The cardboard one, right? The like the one you're talking about,
Yep,
the normal
the Kleenex boxes. Yep. And I'm guilty of it too. Because during the winter months, your allergies are through the roof. You just kind of leave it around. But after that, I've at least tried to leave it on the bench, or get the smaller bags and leave it in the center console or something like that, where it's just not loose things hanging around in the vehicle.
That's a really good point. So my lead case manager, we had her on at the very beginning of our podcast, not this one, but ones previously. And one of the things she mentioned to our potential clients or clients when she was telling people what to do, she was like, take a picture of not only the outside of your car after a collision, but the inside, because that's going to give an indication of things that, how hard the impact was, things flying everywhere. So to your point, yeah, you're right. I mean, I didn't even, and I should know that, but not to leave, stuff that can get flying around. I mean, I'm thinking about, I have my golf clubs in the back of my car, which is, I guess that's 14 things that could impale me.
Yep, pretty much. You're not wrong. And your person that had mentioned about taking pictures of the inside of the car is absolutely right. Because when I look at an accident, the front can be mangled, the back can be mangled, but to us, as first responders, that's not our priority. We actually look at everything from the A-frame, which is the front windshield of the vehicle, all the way back to the last pillar. And if there's any intrusion into that, whether front to back or left to right, that's what we're looking for, because that's what will tell you what the extent of the injuries to the person is. Because you have three impacts. You have the vehicle to something, then you have yourself to the vehicle, and then you have everything inside of you to the outside of your rib cage. So sometimes you see some steering wheels kind of like bent like this now from the person coming in over it, or you'll see like the door, any one of the doors coming in like a foot or two sometimes, and that's usually the
Right.
worst accident, or the not so good accidents, you can say.
So with technology getting better and better and better, like all the way around with, I guess, manufacturing probably of cars, but there's going to be self-driving cars. And so where do you see, there's a couple different layers to this question, but where do you see, first of all, technology, helping with, the EMS response and how you do your job as a volunteer first responder?
Oh boy, we could really have fun on this topic over here. So, we have, when I first started, things that the kids definitely don't know, which is what they call key maps. you know, where back in the day, we would, get dispatched. It sounds like a phone call that comes over the intercom, and it'll say, go to 1234 Main Street, key map page, Delta 8 or something like that. So we would have to flip it up, and we have to look. And then, granted, if it's just an accident where there's not much preparation for us at that point, outside of gloves and some gear, we're kind of fine. I can still kind of steer you where you need to go. But if it's a fire call or something a little more complex, or there's donning of gear and whatnot, now I'm trying to look. I'm trying to look at a map. Flip to the right page. Okay, get my orientation right. Make sure I'm taking the right, left, right. So technology, as far as mapping and getting us there more efficiently, has been a huge player. Automated dispatching or semi-assisted automated dispatching has been a great thing too, because the dispatcher can actually talk, and she'll type, and that information gets relayed to us over our MDTs, which is our little computer screens on the side over here, so we can get that information better, faster, and better prepare for some of these calls, because a lot of times we'll go to a unknown medical call, and then we'll get there, and it's holy cow. It's like, you're kind of thinking, it's like, that's not what I was planning to come into. We've had incidents where I've literally walked into a room thinking it's just a medical call, and the baby plops out. And you're just like, wasn't expecting to play catch today, but I guess that's what we're going to kind of do, So, we always expect the unexpected, so it's not a big deal. But sometimes if we have just a little more background, just like yourself, if you have a little more background, it'll just make everybody's day a little easier.
Right.
And technology has touched every part from hydrodynamics of our hoses. Now our cutters and spreaders and the tools they use to cut people out with are all battery powered. And they weigh next to nothing for what they do.
Right.
We could take them underwater. We can do all that fun stuff with it. Versus before, 70 pounds is almost like a two-person operation to really get into certain vehicles or whatnot. But now you can and open a car like a Coca-Cola.
That's cool. Yep. What about AI being involved in the 911 calls? Or is it, I would assume that at some point it's going to be the computer answering the phone instead of a person, I would think, or no?
I think the computer will assist a lot of it. I think AI is a tool, and it's a very sharp tool. I think it's definitely a tool that, if utilized correctly, it can help both, the suppression side and the consumer side. But we just have to know how to use it. I think AI is making a leaps and bounds faster than I think that we can ever have thought to get to where it's at right now. But, as far as our dispatch, it helps out in a great way. I know that even on certain EMS programs and applications that you and I have talked about, I was like, we want some sort of predictive thinking. Because again, we are all humans still. At the end of the day, we are prone to errors. So as much data as AI can kind of gather, say it's looking at our vitals and everything in this, macro perspective, it can tell you, hey, you know what, this might be something you didn't consider, and it will allow us to better treat for that as well.
Yeah, and I'm, just brainstorming it with you right now. I was just thinking, like, if let's say you got a call, and it's like 1234 Main Street, and the database, the AI agent or whatever, the database is saying, okay, well, the last, 20 calls we've ever gotten from that address are this type of call, and or that apartment complex is 50 years old and probably made of this wood. It's going to burn fast. You know what I'm saying? Like all this data that you wouldn't know.
Yep.
And it's like, and then it's shooting it all with directions to you saying, okay, be aware of this, this, and this because of all this information it has. So that would be, I don't know, just brainstorming. That would be
I think
interesting.
that you're absolutely right. And the great thing about AI is it is a mecca of information. And I think that's where, at the end of the day, ultimately, you'll still need a human element to kind of filter some of that out to see what is pertinent and what is necessary and what may not be as primarily needed at the moment in time.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I know you deal with a ton of 911 calls and you dealing with emergencies. What would you say, are the most, if you're advising people that are just listening to this podcast, some of the things that people call 911 for, and you're like, okay, stop doing that because you're wasting our resources and it's not good. And then other things that you're like, hey, you know what? People should be calling more for this type of thing and they don't. Like, what do you say about that?
So, it's one of those things where I think we see it on the billboard all the time. It's like, if a bee stings you, go to urgent care. If a whole hive of bees, meet you in your closet, yes, call 911.
Right.
Remember, 911 should be used when it is a immediate threat to life. So if someone has stopped breathing, if something is broken, if you potentially might be having a stroke, things of that nature, definitely call 911. If you stubbed your toe at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I get it, it really hurts and it feels like your toe is about to fall off. Not so much.
Right.
My biggest thing is if you have a patent airway, which means you're breathing, if you're not bleeding profusely, and you just that you're going to survive the next hour,
Right.
then you're typically okay. Another big thing that people still call till today about is cats and trees. And I tell people, I was like, my old fire chief, I heard him when he used to actually answer the phone. Sometimes he was like, well, it's a tree on fire. And the lady's like, no. He was like, well, then goodbye. Because he was like, you never see a cat skeleton in the tree. You will
Nope.
never find a cat skeleton in a tree. So he's like, don't worry about the cats. Now let me conclude that, piece with this, where it's like, hey, and if you're not sure, call 911. It's okay. That's what we are there for,
Right.
but I think a lot of this is public education. I'm really glad you're doing this, Ralph, because a lot of people, if you just don't know, you don't know. For example, a
Right.
cerebral seizure, babies, when they're born, don't know how to acclimate themselves when they are too hot. Their body hasn't learned how to dispel this heat. So they'll seize a little bit, and that looks daunting, especially if you're a new parent. You see your baby seize, and you're like, oh my God, what's going on? And I was like, hey, look, you think your baby has a cold. You probably wrapped him in 3 layers of fleece, and he's just really, really overheated right now. And you got to let the fever dissipate. So those things, no problem at all. I was
Right.
like, but if you're calling me because, again, you stubbed your toe or you
Right.
can't get your lip piercing out and it's 3 a.m. and you're just really angry, don't call me for that.
I'm sure you're really nice about it when you decline to send your squad over there.
You are
Oh, so
very humble because sometimes I am, and sometimes probably I probably should be a little more nicer sometimes. But you know what? If I tell everyone this: if the shoes are reversed, and I called you over to my house to get the ketchup from the fridge at 3 o'clock in the morning, what
right.
would you do to me?
Well, and I'm
So yeah.
sure, I mean, I can't imagine during, COVID, people calling and like, it's like, I have COVID. And you're like, okay. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't even know how y'all would have handled those thousands and thousands of calls.
So it's ABCs for us, airway, breathing, circulation. And COVID affects everyone a little bit differently. And that was a tough time for everybody. We're figuring it out. The world is figuring it out, right? So, if people have flu-like symptoms, I get it. You feel really bad. If you want us to run you to the hospital, yes, we'll more have to do so. But what people don't realize is when you go to the hospital, oh, here's another one. Just because you called 911 doesn't mean you get seen faster at the
You're in
hospital.
line.
You're in line by priority of what is happening. If someone has a gunshot wound and they're legitimately dying, or someone else is having a stroke, they are going to go in front of you. If you have the flu, don't get me wrong, I'm sure it really sucks. I was like, but if there's a more emergent need, they're going to be seen first. So don't call 911 because you think it's going to jump you in line, because it really, really doesn't.
Well, we need more people like you in the world that are volunteering to help people, first of all, and are great people, great dads, great husbands, great friends. So Thank you very much. It's really my pleasure to see you again, and I look forward to seeing you again soon, as
We
always.
look absolutely forward to seeing you again as well too. And I'll throw this out there: if anyone's ever interested, feel free to forward them on my number or my email. Check us out, community VFD for volunteerfiredepartment.com. If you're ever interested in coming to do a ride along just to see it for a life experience, hit me up. I'll be more than happy to show you a good time.
Yeah, and absolutely. And Stephen had mentioned to me earlier, if you have teenage kids who don't, think that it can happen to them, send them on one ride along with Stephen, and will
Yes,
change their mind.
I promise you, it's a good little lesson.
Well, thanks, man. I will see you soon. Appreciate you.
Thank you, bye. I'll talk to you guys soon. Take care.
You just learned something new. Attorney 911, the podcast, with attorney Ralph Manginello. We hope you found today's conversation insightful and helpful. Don't forget to subscribe to the show so you'll never miss an episode, and share it with family and friends who might benefit from the things we talk about. A new podcast launches every week. That means you get more legal tips, real-life cases, and expert advice. This is Attorney 911, the podcast.